The doctor was a good man, and he had good news for me, and I sat in that chair and I hated him for it. He put the results up on his screen and walked me through them. Heart of a man 20 years younger, blood pressure fine, cholesterol fine, blood work clean across the board. He turned in his chair, pleased, and said, "Gordon, I have patients half your age I would trade these numbers for. You are going to be around a long time." And I remember the thing that went through me when he said it, and I have never told anybody until right now. I thought, that is the worst news you could have given me.
Welcome to Abroad Pal. I'm Peter Walker, and this is the channel where we sit down with people who left home and built a life somewhere new. The man who opened this story is Gordon Pruitt, and today he is here on the porch with me. Gordon, thank you for having me on.
Thank you for inviting me, Peter. I am glad of the company and glad to tell it to somebody who will let me tell it straight.
Straight is the only way I want it, so let me set you up for the folks first. I've spent years talking to Americans who walked away from the life everyone told them to want, and most of them were in their 70s when they did it. Gordon is 71, and he spent his whole working life being the person a room depended on, right up until the day nobody did. He walked into a doctor's office half hoping for bad news, and he did not get it. Gordon, take me back into that exam room. You told us a clean bill of health felt like the worst thing that man could hand you, and I want to understand it. Take me to the person you were before you sat down in that chair.
Because I had gone into that office half hoping the man would find something. A shadow on a scan, a number out of range, something with a name that I could point at and say, there, that is what is wrong. That is why I feel like this. And instead, he told me I was healthy as a horse and would go on for years. And all I heard was that I was going to have to keep doing this. The getting up, the long gray afternoons, the waiting. For a long time more than I had thought. My name is Gordon Pruitt. Most of my life people called me Mr. Pruitt, and a few thousand of them still would if they saw me on the street. I am 71 years old, and I taught high school physics in Rochester, Minnesota for 34 years. I need to tell you who I was before, because the whole of this story is about a man disappearing, and I want you to see the man before he went. I was good at that job. I do not say that to boast. I say it because it was the truest thing about me. I could take a room of 16-year-olds who had decided in advance that physics was not for them, and by October I would have half of them staying after the bell to argue with me about black holes. I coached the academic team on top of it 30 years, and we went to state 11 times, and won it twice. And I have a photograph somewhere of a busload of teenagers screaming with a trophy that meant more to me than I ever let them see. I married Eleanor in 1976. She taught third grade 2 schools over, 41 years. We never had children of our own, which was a sorrow we carried quietly and folded into the work. And I think in the end we told ourselves that a few thousand other people's children was not the worst way to spend a life. Eleanor used to grade her spelling tests at one end of the kitchen table, while I graded my lab reports at the other, and the radio would be on low, and I would give a great deal to have one more of those ordinary evenings back. I retired at 66. Everybody told me I had earned it. That is the word they use, earned, like rest is the prize at the end, and you are a fool if you do not want it. I had watched other men retire and go to seed, and I told myself I would be different. I had plans, books I was going to read, a garage full of projects. Maybe I would tutor a little. The first Monday of retirement, I sat at that kitchen table at 7 in the morning out of 40 years of habit, dressed, coffee poured, and I had nowhere on this earth I needed to be. And I sat there until the coffee went cold. And I want to tell you, that first cold cup of coffee was the beginning of something I did not have a name for yet. And it took me 5 years and a heart scare that was not a heart scare to understand what it was. Then Eleanor got sick, 18 months after I retired. It was slow, which everyone kept calling a blessing, time to say goodbye. And I will tell you there is no blessing in watching the sharpest woman you ever knew lose the words for things one at a time. I nursed her at home for the better part of 2 years. And here is a thing I am not proud of, but I promised myself I would tell this straight. Those 2 years were the last time I felt like myself, terrible as they were, because she needed me. There was a reason to get up. There was a person who was better off because I was in the room. When Eleanor died, I did not only lose my wife, I lost the last job I had, the last reason anybody needed me to be anywhere, and that is when I went quiet. I do not have a better word for what happened over the next 3 years. I went quiet, like a house does when the power is cut. Everything was still there. The furniture. The books I had meant to read, still on the shelf, spines uncracked. I would pick one up and read the same paragraph 4 times and set it back down. The garage project sat under a tarp. I stopped answering the phone, and after a while it stopped ringing, which is the part nobody warns you about, how the phone learns. I was not sad, and I want to be careful here, because people hear this story and they reach for the word depressed and pat you on the hand. It was not sadness. Sadness has weather in it. This was flat. I got up because my body made me. I ate because a clock told me to. I would drive to the grocery store and sit in the parking lot for 20 minutes because I could not think of a single reason to go in and could not think of a reason to go home either. So I sat there, engine off, watching other people carry their bags to their cars, people who seemed to know why they were doing it. People who have not been in that flat place picture a man crying into his hands. It was not that. It was worse than that because it was nothing. I would stand in the cereal aisle at the grocery store holding a box and not be able to generate a reason to put it in the cart or put it back. So I would stand there until someone needed to get by. I let the newspaper pile up on the porch in their orange bags until there were 9 of them and the delivery boy stopped coming. I owned a phone that I watched ring and did not answer, not out of anger, out of a total absence of the thing inside a person that reaches for a ringing phone. A doctor has no test for that. There is no cuff you strap on an arm that reads out how much reason a man has left to be alive. My neighbor, a good woman named Sharon, told me later that she used to watch my house in the evenings to see if a light came on. It usually did not. I would sit in the dark because turning on a lamp was a decision, and I had run out of the machinery that makes decisions. 70 years old, healthy as a horse, sitting in a dark house that had gone silent, waiting. And I knew what I was waiting for. I was too honest with myself not to know. I was waiting to be done. I was not going to do anything about it. I want to be clear. I did not have that in me either. I was only going to sit in that chair in the dark and wait for it to come and take me the slow way. That is the man who went to the doctor hoping for bad news. And when the good doctor gave me the good news that my healthy heart was going to make me sit in that dark chair for 15 or 20 more years, I drove home, and I sat down in it. And something in me that had been holding on for 3 years quietly let go. And then, about a week after that appointment, an email came in from a name I had not thought about in almost 40 years. And that email is the only reason I am sitting on this porch in the sun, on the far side of the world, telling you I am glad the doctor was right.
Gordon, you described something there that a lot of people watching will recognize and never say out loud. Not sadness with weather in it, you called it. Flat. A healthy man sitting in a dark house. Because turning on a lamp was one decision too many. I have sat with people in that exact place. And you are right. There is no cuff on the arm that reads out how much reason a man has left. So an email lands a week after the doctor tells you that you have 20 more years to spend in that chair. Who wrote it? And what did it say?
The name on the email was Ferdinand Ocampo. It took me a minute. And then it came back all at once. Ferdinand Ocampo, class of 1991. A small, serious boy who had come to Rochester from the Philippines at 14, spoke careful textbook English, and sat in the second row of my physics class for 2 years. He had arrived not knowing a soul, and I had put him on the academic team because I could see the mind on him. And by his senior year, he was the best student I had in 20 years. I had written his recommendation for the university. And then he graduated and went off into his life the way they all do. And I had not thought of him in decades. He had found me through the Alumni Association. The email was long and formal, the way he always was. He wrote that he had gone into engineering, done well, and gone home to the Philippines 15 years ago to be near his mother. He wrote that he had thought of me often. And then he wrote a paragraph I had to read 3 times, sitting there in my dark kitchen. He wrote, "Mr. Pruitt, you probably do not know this, but the year I came to Minnesota, my father had died months before, and I did not speak to anyone for months. You were the first adult in that country who acted like I was worth the trouble. You kept me after class to talk about physics, but I understood even then that the physics was partly an excuse. I do not think you know what you did for me. I have wanted to tell you for 30 years. I sat in that kitchen and I read that. An old man in a dark house who had spent 3 years certain that nobody on earth needed him for anything, and my hands were shaking, because somewhere out there was a grown man, an engineer with a family, who had carried something I did without ever knowing I did it, carried it for 30 years, and had gone to the trouble of finding me to say so. I want to tell you about the recommendation letters because it is the thing I keep coming back to. In 34 years, I must have written 2,000 of them. College, scholarships, first jobs. I sat at that kitchen table 1,000 nights, finding the true good thing in a 17-year-old and setting it down in a paragraph so a stranger would see it too. And I never once kept a copy, and I never once thought a single one of them outlived the envelope. You do the work, and you let it go, and you assume it lands in a file drawer somewhere and is forgotten. Ferdinand kept his in a drawer for 30 years. 30 years. And I have wondered since, sitting out here, how many of those 2,000 letters are still in drawers I will never see, in houses I will never visit, doing quiet work in lives I lost track of. A teacher never gets to know. You throw the seed, and you never see the tree. Coming here is the first time in my life the tree grew up in front of me and knocked on my door. I wrote him back. First real thing I had written in longer than I could remember. We began to correspond, and then he asked for my address to send something at Christmas, and I gave it. And in December a box arrived, dried mangoes, and a coffee grown on his island, and a card with a photograph of his family on a green hillside. And then among it a letter, and at the bottom of the letter he wrote, "Mr. Pruitt, you should come, not to visit, to stay. Come and let me look after you the way you looked after a frightened boy. There is room here for you. There is a use for you here. There is a use for you here." I read those 2 sentences more times than I can tell you, because Ferdinand did not know, could not have known, that use was the exact thing I had run out of. Not money, not health. The doctor had given me a clean bill on the health. What I had run out of was any sense that my being alive made one particle of difference to one living soul. And a former student on the other side of the planet had written the one word that could still reach me down in that dark. I want to be honest about what came next, because it did not happen fast, and I am suspicious of stories where it does. I did not book a flight that night. A flat man is not cured by an email, but something had turned over. I found myself at the library, which I had not entered in 2 years, on the computers, reading about his country. And I read for a month, the cost of things, the visa, what a doctor charged. I ran the numbers on my pension and my Social Security, and I sat back, because on paper I could live there like a wealthy man, and here's the strange part, I did not care about that at all. The money was not what leaned me forward at that screen. It was a photograph of a green hillside, and one sentence about a youth. I told Sharon, my neighbor, first. She cried, and then she said, "Gordon, thank God I have been so worried," and I did not know that was the sound of somebody who had been watching my dark windows for 3 years and been afraid. I have a sister in Arizona, Carol, 2 years younger, and I called her, and she was harder about it. She said, "Gordon, you have never done a rash thing in your life, and now at 71 you're going to move to a country you have never seen because a boy you taught in the 90s invited you." She said, "What if you get there, and you are as alone as you are here, only now it is hot and you do not speak the language?" And that one landed, because it was the fear I had not said out loud. What if the flatness got on the plane with me? What if I carried the dark house in my chest to the other side of the world and unpacked it there? I told Carol the truest thing I had said in years. I said, "Carol, if I stay here, I know exactly how it ends. I have been watching how it ends for 3 years from a chair in the dark. If I go, at least I do not know." And at 71, not knowing had started to look like the only thing left worth having. I did not have much to sell. A man who has stopped wanting things has already, without meaning to, emptied his own house. I rented it out rather than sell it. because Carol asked me to keep one foot in Minnesota, and I gave Sharon a key. I kept Eleanor's wedding ring on a chain and a box of academic team photographs and almost nothing else. Ferdinand met every worry I had with a plan. He booked the last flights himself. He arranged the place. He wrote out instructions for the airports in a numbered list, because he remembered I liked a numbered list, and that small thing undid me a little. I flew out of Minneapolis on a morning in April with old snow still gray on the ground, 71 years old, having not been on an airplane since a conference in 1998. 29 hours. Somewhere over the Pacific in the dark. Everyone asleep. I had the bad hour. I think every one of us has on that flight. I thought, Gordon, you flat old fool, you have carried this deadness for 3 years. What makes you think a warm country can lift it? You are going to land, and it is going to be exactly the same, only farther from Eleanor's grave. Then the sun came up over the wing, and there was nothing but blue water and green islands scattered across it like something spilled, and a boy of about 6 across the aisle pressed his face to the window next to mine and said something to his mother in a language I did not know, pointing at the islands, delighted. And I looked at that blue for a long time. I did not feel fixed. I want to be honest, I did not feel fixed. But for the first time in 3 years, I felt something instead of nothing, and I did not yet know that in 9 days a child I had not met would hand me back the only thing I was ever any good at.
You buried the important thing in one sentence again. A student you taught 30 years ago found you, wrote that you were the first adult in this country who treated him like he was worth the trouble. And then he wrote, there is a use for you here. And use was the one thing you had run clean out of. You rented the house, kept Eleanor's ring, and flew 29 hours to a country you had never seen on the word of a boy from your second row. I have watched people talk themselves out of far smaller bets. Then you landed and told us a child you had not yet met was about to hand back the one thing you were ever good at. Gordon, what met you in those first 9 days?
Ferdinand was waiting past the barrier at the little airport on the hall, grayer than the boy in the second row, but the same careful eyes. And when he saw me, he did a thing I did not expect. He did not shake my hand. He took both my hands in both of his, and he bowed his head over them, and he held on, and he said, Mr. Pruitt, welcome home, sir. A grown man of 54. An engineer, calling me sir in an airport and holding onto my hands like I might be taken away. He had found me a house near a town called Lobach, inland, up the river, where the water is green and the trees close over it, and in the evening the whole valley goes gold. A small concrete house with a porch and a tin roof, and a jackfruit tree in the yard the size of a small building. I am sitting on that porch right now. Let me give you the numbers, because I was a physics teacher for 34 years, and I know some of you came for the arithmetic. The house is 11,000 pesos a month, about $200 for the whole house, and the yard, and the tree. Electric is $40 or $50 when I run the bedroom air conditioner at night, and at my age in this heat, I run it. Water is a few dollars. The internet is $30. And it holds a video call to my sister in Arizona better than my Minnesota connection ever did, which I have stopped trying to explain to anyone. Call it $300 a month for the roof and the power and the line to the world. Food, I will not even dress up. There is a little place in town, the Carinderia, where a woman lifts the lids off a row of pots, and you point at what looks good, and a full plate is under $2. The fish comes up from the coast in the morning. I have learned to eat things I could not have named 3 years ago, and I eat better now than I have since Eleanor did the cooking. My food for a month runs $350, and I am not careful about it. A woman named Perla comes twice a week and cleans and does my washing, and I pay her well over the local rate and a bonus at Christmas, and it costs me around $60 a month. My one blood pressure pill is $9 where it was $70 back home. Add the whole life up, and I live well, not scraping on well under $1,000 a month, on a teacher's pension and Social Security that together are more than triple that. For the first time since I retired, money is the least of my worries. But money was never the thing that had me sitting in the dark, and it is not the thing that got me out of it. The thing that got me out of it was a 9-year-old named Junjun. Junjun is the son of my neighbor down the lane. About 2 weeks in, I was on my porch in the evening, and I heard a child on the other side of the hedge, making the particular frustrated sound a child makes at homework, and a mother's tired voice trying to help and not being able to. I did not think about it. 34 years of reflex stood me up out of the chair and carried me to the hedge before the flat man in me could stop it. I asked over the hedge, "What are we working on?" And the mother, whose name is Emily, looked up startled, and the boy looked up, and there on the paper in a country 8,000 miles from my classroom was a page of the exact fractions I had taught for 34 years. I asked if I could see it. I sat down on their step, and I did the thing I know how to do in this world better than I know how to do anything else. I found the one place the boy was confused, the single wrong turn under all the frustration, the way I had found it 10,000 times, and I took him back to it, and I watched his face do the thing, the click, the moment the fog clears behind a child's eyes, and the thing that was locked comes open, and he sees it. He sees it himself. Junjun looked up at me with his whole face lit and said, in English, "Oh, it is easy." It is easy. I had to look up the lane for a moment so the boy would not see, because for 3 years I had been certain, down in my bones, that the man who used to make that happen in children was gone, buried with Eleanor, retired out of existence. And here on a stranger's step at dusk, that man had stood up inside me at the sound of a child stuck on fractions, and he was not gone at all. He had only been waiting for a child to meet him. The whiteboard deserves its own word, because a small thing can turn out to be the hinge a whole life swings on. Ferdinand bought it for me the second week, a cheap little dry erase board, and I stood it against the porch post. The first afternoon I uncapped a marker in front of Junjun. My hand knew the exact weight of it, the exact squeak of it on the board, the way you never forget a thing your body did 40,000 times. And I wrote out a fraction, and I heard my own voice do the thing it does, drop and slow down and get patient. The teacher voice, a voice I had not heard come out of me in 5 years. I did not know I still had it in me. I had assumed it was retired along with the rest of me. It turned out it had only been switched off, the way you switch off a light in a room you were leaving, and it came back on the instant a child needed to see the board. Word travels on a lane here faster than any bell. Inside of a month, there were 3 of them on my porch after school. Then 5. Junjun and his cousin, and the twins from the corner, and a serious girl named Rika, who reminds me so much of Ferdinand at that age that the first time she stayed after the others to ask an extra question, I had to turn away and pretend to look for a pencil. I do not charge 1 peso for it, and I have had to be firm about that, because these families tried to pay me in the only ways they had. And now instead, my porch fills up with mangoes and eggs and bowls of hot food, and Emily irons my shirts and will not be argued with. I teach them at the table on my porch under the tin roof. I have a little whiteboard Ferdinand bought me. When it rains, and here it comes down like the sky has given up, the rain roars on that tin roof so loud we have to lean in close over the board. 6 kids and 1 old man in a country I could not have found on a map 3 years ago, doing fractions in the roar. And I am telling you, I have not been that happy since the buses used to pull back into the school lot at midnight with a trophy. My days have a shape now, and the shape is the point. I'm up at 5:30 because the roosters here answer to no clock and you make your peace with it. I make the coffee. Ferdinand's cousin grows up in the hills, and I sit on this porch and watch the valley come up out of the mist. I walk into town for whatever is fresh. The woman at the market, Nanai Sealy, saves me the good fish and scolds my terrible Visayan, and the whole stall loves that the old teacher is a bad student for once. In the afternoon heat I lie under the fan, and at 4 the children come, and I am Sir Gordon again, or Lolo Gordon to the little ones, and for 2 hours my porch is the loudest, best place I know. Let me tell you what the walk to the market is, because it is the exact opposite of a thing I used to do, and I only saw that after I'd done it 100 times. Back in Rochester, at the worst of it, I would drive to the grocery store and sit in the parking lot with the engine off and watch other people carry their bags, unable to find the reason to go in. 40 minutes some days. Here I cannot walk the quarter-mile into town without it taking most of an hour. And for the reverse reason, a mother stops me to ask about her boy's grades. A child runs up and does the magno and runs off. Nanai Kelly holds the good fish behind the counter and will not let me leave until I have failed to pronounce 3 new words for her amusement. The barber calls me in to settle an argument about the moon landing. I set out for a kilo of rice, and I come home 2 hours later, having been needed by 9 people. In Minnesota, I sat in a parked car, unable to think of one reason to move. Here I cannot cross the town square without collecting more reasons than an old man knows what to do with. Ferdinand drives up from Tagabilaran most Sundays with his wife, and they bring food and we sit on the porch until dark. His mother, who is 88, has decided I am her friend, and she holds my hand and talks to me in Bisaya, and I do not understand a word, and I would not trade it for anything. On Sundays, sometimes we go down to the river and take one of the long boats, and the whole Green Valley slides past, and I think, 3 years ago, I was sitting in a dark parking lot with the engine off, and now look. I let myself believe the hard part was behind me. 8 months in, I was more alive than I had been since Eleanor, and I thought the arithmetic of my life had finally come out in my favor. And then one afternoon, right in the middle of a fractions lesson, with 6 children at my table, the porch went sideways, and the whiteboard came up to meet me. And the next thing I knew, I was on the concrete with Rika screaming my name. And what those children in this lane did over the next hour is the reason I will be buried on this island.
You gave us the whole new life. The whiteboard against the porch post, 6 kids doing fractions in the roar of the rain, a market walk that takes 2 hours because 9 people need you. And then you set us down on the concrete with Rika screaming your name. That right there, getting sick so far from home, is a fear that keeps more people your age in the dark house than any number on a screen. So I have to ask you straight, Gordon. The afternoon the porch went sideways. What happened next?
It was my blood pressure dropped out from under me, and a heart rhythm that had decided to misbehave for the first time in my clean-as-a-whistle life. I did not know that on the floor. I only knew the room had tipped, and I could not get up, and there was a ringing. And here is what I will carry to my grave. Those 6 children did not panic and scatter. Rika, 11 years old, was already on my phone. Junjun ran, and I mean ran, out the gate and down the lane shouting for his mother. And by the time I could make sense of the ceiling, there were faces over me, Emily and 2 other mothers. And someone had my legs up on a cushion. And someone had a cool cloth. And a tricycle was already coughing to life at my gate because a 9-year-old had thought to send another child to fetch it. They did not put me in that tricycle. Emily made a call, and a neighbor with an actual car, a man I had waved to but never met, backed it down the lane, and they laid me across the seat and drove me the winding hour to the hospital in Tagbilaran. And Emily rode the whole way in the back, holding my head in her lap, this woman whose child's fractions I had corrected over a hedge, telling me in English, "Stay with us, Sir Gordon. The children are waiting for you. You have homework to check." Ferdinand met us at the hospital. He had left work and beaten us there. And the family thing, which I had read about and not understood, I understood it that week. In that hospital, the nurses do the medicine and the family does the rest. And I had no family on that island. And so a rotation formed around my bed without one word of discussion. Ferdinand took the nights. Emily and the mothers took the days. Perla, who cleans my house, appeared with food and would not leave. And on the second afternoon, I woke from a doze, and my whole hospital room was full of children. 6 of them lined up against the wall, scrubbed and silent and terrified and holding, of all the things in this world, their fraction homework, because they did not know what else to bring the teacher. I looked at those 6 children lined up along the wall of a hospital room with their homework in their hands, and I broke. Right there in the bed, an old man of 71 who had come to this island 3 years dead inside, weeping in front of 6 children and a former student, because I finally understood the thing all the way down. In Minnesota, when I fell, no one would have known for days. Sharon might have seen the papers pile up. Here, I got dizzy at my own table, and within 1 hour, a lane full of people who owed me nothing had picked me up off the floor and filled a hospital room. And the children brought their homework so the teacher would have a reason to come back. Ferdinand leaned over the bed and he said quietly, so the children would not hear, "Mr. Pruitt, do you remember what you wrote in my recommendation letter 30 years ago?" I said I did not. He said, "You wrote." This young man's presence improved every room he entered. He said, "I have kept that letter in a drawer for 30 years. And now look at this room." And I could not answer him at all. The whole thing. The ambulance transfer, 3 nights, the test, the heart specialist who sat on the edge of my bed and drew me a diagram because he learned I had taught physics and thought I would like the diagram, and I did, came to a little under $700. I paid it out of pocket and walked out under my own power with a small daily pill and instructions. That same event in an American hospital would have opened a bill that outlived me. I called Carol in Arizona from the hospital, my hard-nosed little sister who had asked me on the phone, what if I would be as alone there, only hot? And I told her all of it, the children, the homework against the wall, Emily holding my head in the car, and there was a long silence on the line, and then my sister, who does not cry, was crying. She came in October. She stayed 12 days. I watched this island do to Carol exactly what it did to me. She sat on my porch at 4 in the afternoon and watched 6 children come through my gate calling Sir Gordon, and she watched me become, in front of her, the brother she remembered from before, the one who lit up a room, the one she had privately given up for loss 3 years ago. On her last night, she sat on this porch and she said, "Gordon, I flew here to talk you into coming home." And she stopped, and she started again, and she said, "You are home. I can see it. I am not going to say the other thing." And she did not. I will tell you about Rika because if I do not, she will never forgive me, and she would be right. She is 11, and she is the one who reminds me of Ferdinand. And she has the thing you cannot teach, the hunger. The others come because their mothers send them. Rika comes because she cannot stand not knowing. She stays after the rest have run off, and she asks me the question under the question, the way the good ones do. A month ago, she asked me what holds the moon up. And I put the fractions away, and I spent an hour on gravity with a mango and a calamansi on the porch rail as my planets. And she did not blink. And at the end, she was quiet a long time, and then she said, "So nothing holds it up. It is falling, and it is always missing." And that is it. That is the whole thing, said better by an 11-year-old on a porch in Bohol than I ever said it to a room in Minnesota. I wrote to Ferdinand that night. I told him I found the next one. He wrote back one line. "Then you had better stay alive and teach her, sir. I will not sell you a paradise because a story with no cost in it is a lie you can smell coming. The heat in April flattens you, and you learn to do nothing until the sun drops. The power cuts out, and you sit in the dark and sweat. And for me, the first few times the dark came, it frightened me in a way I did not expect, because I had spent 3 years in a different dark, and my body remembered it. The paperwork to stay legal is a slow misery, a whole day in a government office to be sent home for one more photocopy. And I miss things. I miss the particular gold of a Minnesota October. I miss Eleanor, with an ache this warm air softens and does not cure. And I talk to her out here on the porch in the morning. And I tell her about the children. And I know exactly what she would say about Rika, but that dark house in Rochester had no children in it. That is the whole arithmetic, and I am a man who spent his life on arithmetic. The bad days here are clouds crossing something warm. The bad days there were the entire sky, closed over, for 3 years. Last month it was my birthday, 71, and I told no one because I have never been able to abide a fuss. Perla led on that she had forgotten, which should have warned me because that woman forgets nothing. I came up the lane from the market, and my house was full and loud. Ferdinand and his wife and his 88-year-old mother in the best chair, Emily and the mothers, Perla and her husband, all 6 of my students in their good clothes, and Rika had made me a card that had a fraction on the front of it, a joke between us that I will not try to explain, and it is on my wall now, and it will be on my wall the day I die. Somebody had made kare kare, an oxtail stew, because somewhere along the way they had learned it was becoming my favorite. 30 people in a small concrete house, up a river valley on an island I could not have found 3 years ago. Not one of them owed me a thing. I stood in my own doorway with a bag of fish in my hand, and I could not make my legs carry me over the step, because I was thinking of the other doorway, the dark house in Rochester, and the chair, and the phone that had learned not to ring, and a healthy heart sentencing me to 15 more years of exactly that. That is where I was headed, on purpose, with my eyes open. And I looked at this loud, bright, crowded little room, 6 children yelling, "Sir Gordon," an old woman who does not share my language holding out her hand to me, and the bag of fish slipped out of my grip onto the floor, and I stood in my doorway at 71 and wept in front of all of them, and not one soul looked away. Rika came and took my hand and led me in, the way you lead an old man, and put me in a chair, and the room closed warm around me. The doctor said I was fine, and they were right, and for a long time being right was a curse, because a healthy body with no reason inside it is only a longer sentence. I was not dying of anything a doctor could find. I was dying of being no longer needed, and there is no test for that, and no pill, and every doctor I ever saw missed it because they were looking at the machine and not at the man running it. A boy I taught in 1991 remembered one kind thing and wrote to tell me 30 years late, and it reached down into a dark house and pulled me out. And a 9-year-old stuck on fractions stood the teacher back up on his feet without knowing he was doing it. I did not come to this island to be saved. I came because not knowing how it ended had started to look better than knowing, and this green valley full of people who needed the one thing I still had to give handed me back, the reason the doctors could not find. I am 71. That good heart the doctor bragged on is going to keep me here a while yet, and for the first time in 6 years, I want the years. I've got fractions to teach, and a card with a joke on it on the wall, and 6 children who expect me at 4 o'clock. I was waiting to die in a dark house in Minnesota. I found a reason to live up a river on the far side of the earth, and it was never the beaches, and it was never the money. It was a child looking up from a page and saying, "Oh, it is easy." That is the whole of it. That is what I crossed the world to get back.
Gordon Pruitt walked into a doctor's office hoping for a diagnosis, and the truest thing in his whole story is that the doctor was not wrong. He was only reading the wrong machine. Nothing in Gordon's body was failing. The reason to run it had run out. The Philippines did not repair his heart. His heart was fine. The place handed him back the one thing he was ever good at, a child looking up from a page and saying, "Oh, it is easy. My job on this channel is to be straight with you, so let me be." Gordon got the biggest thing right, and it is the thing I want you to carry out of here. He did not move for the beaches or the $200 house, and he will tell you that himself. He moved toward a use. The people I watch wither abroad are the ones who chased only the cheap rent and landed with nothing to do all day, and a cheap, empty afternoon is still an empty afternoon. Before you price a flight, ask what you will be needed for when you land. Gordon had Ferdinand, a former student on the ground who met him at the airport and held on to his hands. That person is worth more than any exchange rate. He got 2 more things right, and you should steal them. He rented the house instead of selling it, so he kept 1 foot in Minnesota and a way back if the flatness had followed him onto the plane. And he let the decision take a month at a library computer instead of 1 hot night. A flat man is not cured by an email, he told us, and he was right to distrust a fast yes. I will name the risk, because Gordon would want it named. He flew one way at 71 with a heart he had barely had checked, and it dropped him on his own porch 8 months later. It came out right because an 11-year-old grabbed the phone, and a lane full of near strangers filled a hospital room. Do not build a plan on that kind of luck. Get the heart looked at before you fly. Keep money set aside for the bigger hospital in the city, and know where it sits before a child has to run for the car. Gordon spent his life on arithmetic, so he left us with the sum. A dark house with no children in it, against a porch that fills up at 4 o'clock. He reached the right answer, and it cost him 3 years in the chair to get there. Most of us have more room to change the ending than we let ourselves believe, and less time to do it than we think. I'm Peter Walker. If this helped, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.